Did you see it?
No, exactly. I think it was more about public space. But also, I noticed his remark about the sex, which is not
עכשיו זה יהיה פתוח?
פתוח פה.
saying that
מי שעוד לא נכנס, אני מבקש להיכנס.
he's getting on.
גדעון, סגור את זה, כן, יופי, תודה. I now feel at home. 4 ambassadors, and I am ex-ambassador, so this is my my gang. I will do it in the order they sit, and it's not a political statement. And the first close to me is Clemens Getze, the ambassador of Germany in Israel, and a good friend from the Brussels day. He and I spent time there, and Clemens was the ambassador of Germany to the PSC. This is one of the bodies of the European Union, which basically makes the decisions that afterwards are adopted by the Council of Ministers on the political issues, and very good friend. In the morning, Mr. Michael Bolshout addressed us in the name of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and I didn't tell them the story of the visit of Chancellor Kohl to this part of the world, and he came immediately after the signing of the Oslo Accords, and the meeting with Rabin and Hussein took place in what is called Aram Naharaim, Bakura in the Arabic language, and this is just south of the Sea of Galilee. And he met there both, the Chancellor Kohl met Rabin and Peres, and he promised that Germany will help all the solutions for the water issues of 400 million marks. At the time there was no euro yet, it was in marks. And what we heard this morning about the German assistance to the water issues in the region was far above the 400 million marks that Chancellor Kohl promised at the time. So I'm sure that we will hear more from you about this assistance. The next is an ambassador of Sweden, Carl Magnus Nesser. Difficult times for Sweden and Israel, but we admire you for the job you're doing. We heard the previous speaker saying that he spoke about a possible contribution of Sweden to the issue of water, and if you can enlighten us, we will be delighted. The next at the podium or on the podium is Ambassador Borg Andersen, the ambassador of the EU, also a veteran of the same PSC, the Political and Security Committee of the EU, an old hand in Middle Eastern affairs. Somehow slightly more than somehow involved in the roadmap. Those who remember, the roadmap was born first in Copenhagen and later was adopted in slightly different version by the international community in 2003. And I think that, and somehow I hope that this roadmap will come back as one of the possible platforms on which we can renew the peace process. And it doesn't rule out, in fact, the possibility that water will be part of this first stages towards the implementation of the two-state solution. And the last on the podium is the representative, in fact, the acting head of USID to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Fortunately, Israel is not a client anymore of the AID, but we very much appreciate what your agency is doing in support of the infrastructure, economy of our neighbors, the Palestinians. And so, what we hope to hear from you is what your countries are already doing in the context of the Middle East process generally on these issues of water, and what else can we do in order to push forward the solution of this particular issue, the water, and what can be done in this respect in the future, the immediate future, and how does it relate to the overall two-state solution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I will use the order in which you sit, and I would call you, Clemens, to begin with. If you want to use, all of you want to use the podium, you're welcome. I am going to step down.
No, if you allow, I'll do it from here. Is that okay?
Right,
Can everybody hear me? Yeah. That this region with its rather arid climate, at least for a lot of months in the year, is a region where water plays a central role. I think that's very obvious. That has not to be stated here in detail. And that a region that is not huge in size around Israel has connected problems, and that the water systems are connected, but also the wastewater problems are very much connected in the region. That's also very obvious because wastewater that is produced, for example, in the West Bank, will flow down to the Mediterranean through Beersheba and through Gaza into the Mediterranean, and then get upstream along the Israeli coast again because of the Nile Stream. So it's very clear that all the water questions, from fresh water, from using the aquifers, to wastewater treatment and cleaning are all very well connected and don't stop at whatever kind of borders. My second remark is, in a general term, is this is a region where we don't have a lack of technology. I mean, there are parts of the world where water treatment needs foreign advice, and Germany, by the way, in some countries together with Israel is doing that, in some countries in Africa. But here in Israel, water technology is maybe most advanced in the world, and Israel is well known for not only its drop irrigation, but also for its excellent desalination technology. So the technology in principle is here and has not to be brought in by foreign experts. Third remark, the water situation nevertheless is deteriorating. The aquifers are diminishing. We have a growing population in the area, and we have diminishing water resources. So that has to be refilled. either by better usage of fresh water or by better usage of wastewater. Both are the options. I mean, it's not that always you need fresh water supply to irrigate plants, and Israel is a very exemplary case where wastewater is used up to the best, but that has also to be stretched to the West Bank, to Gaza, and to Jordan. So the problem is multifold, and it's overlaid by unsolved political questions. You have meant that we have not yet reached a final solution of the Israeli-Palestinian problem. Nevertheless, water questions are pressing and have to be solved because once, for example, the aquifer in Gaza is salinated below or above a certain threshold and the quality of water thereby below a certain threshold, then the whole aquifer is not usable anymore. So things are getting rather dramatic, and that's why, in our view, solutions are urgent. The better the solutions are prepared, the better the final situation can be if ever we come to a peace process and to a peace solution. It's a great incentive also then to find a permanent model of common water usage, but we cannot wait until the political solution is finalized, because the problems have to be tackled now, today, and tomorrow. But we should also never lose out of sight that for a real and comprehensive solution, it will also need a political framework of the peace process. On a word, what Germany is doing, as you said, we have made water treatment, water supply, one of the major elements of our development cooperation, of our economic cooperation with the Palestine Authority, with Jordan. We are particularly active in the fields of wastewater treatment, in canals for wastewater. There are German projects in Ramallah, in Nablus, but also a big project in Gaza, where we have been active in the past, and where now the German Minister for Economic Cooperation, Gerd Müller, just last week has laid the groundstone for a new wastewater treatment facility in Gaza to see that this wastewater is treated correctly and not just ending up unfiltered in the Mediterranean. And also in Jordan, Germany is very active in the water field. In both cases, our ongoing portfolio of projects is over 300 million euros, both in the West Bank and in Jordan. So this is really a considerable engagement of Germany, and we are interested and willing to continue that. Thank you.
Thank you. You said something that I understood it as a renewal of a project in Gaza. Can you elaborate on that? What is the quantity? What is the investment there? בסוף הוא יענה. If you can elaborate on the project in Gaza, does it involve? What is the details? Very shortly about that.
Yeah, but it's a wastewater treatment facility about in the center of the Gaza Strip, with quite a considerable investment going into a double-digit number of euros if finished.
Okay. Ambassador Nessa, can I ask you to?
Yes, thank you very much. I have two problems. One is I have a terrible toothache, and the other one is I have a very long speech. So I'll try to, in the interest... Very good, very good, very good. So I'll try to be very brief, both for my sake and for yours. So I'll try to abbreviate a bit. I wanted to thank you, Audrey, for leading the panel. We have been to a number of events with you. We have cooperated with you. It's always very, very well done and done in a fantastic way. So thank you. And thank you to Gideon Bromberg, of course, of EcoPeace, our favorite NGO with its focus on practical solutions to big challenges. I think this is the right approach, and we're very happy to be partnering with you, Gideon, and of course also Michael Konrad Adenauer Stiftung with your excellent programming here in Israel. We're really happy to cooperate. I listened very carefully to the previous panel. Also, I thought it was very interesting. It gave us a lot of new food for thought. And I also was delighted to listen to Deputy Minister Kara, who honored us with his presence. He was visiting Stockholm in September for the Water Week, as he mentioned, and he was there at the same time as the Palestinian water minister. Water diplomacy is important, and I think the Stockholm Water Week will continue to be a platform for interaction on important water issues. I was last week at a school in Galilee, together with Tel Aviv University and the Jewish National Fund, because we are working on the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, and Israel is doing very well usually in this competition. We were studying the project of a very promising young scientist who had been to Stockholm and had a fantastic time. So water is certainly one area where Israel can contribute to the world in a very tangible way and share its ideas and its progress to create positive developments around the world, and we're trying to partner up with that. And then finally, in this short intro, I wanted to say also, as in response to your question, Ordered, that we are looking at the issue of water in the Middle East, the peace process context right now in Stockholm. We are not exactly ready yet, but we are working on this, and we think it's certainly very interesting. We are aware of all the issues. You have listened to my colleague, the ambassador in Amman, at the conference that you had a couple of weeks ago. There was a donors conference on the Red Dead project, of course, last week, where we participated. So you continue to see Swedish representatives pop up and present messages and so on and so on. But there's a review going on, and we will come out of that very soon, I think. But very briefly to summarize my very long speech. Water is of fundamental importance, and this is really clear. I think we have talked about that. The previous panel touched upon that issue, not only from the Israeli perspective, but also from a global perspective. I think that's a very important issue. The World Economic Forum has identified water as the #1 global long-term risk. So clearly, this is on the radar screen internationally. Sweden and the international community is focusing on water for that reason, and we are trying to take a lead to meet these challenges. We have focused on both significant support.
Hold on.
Yeah.
There are people who have forgotten to turn off the telephones or move it to a different mode. So please look at the phones and turn them quiet at least. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, so I'm just going to say that we're spending a lot of money on support for water and sanitation issues at global and regional levels. But we're also focusing on supporting integrated water resources management and also improved cooperation over shared water resources. For the MENA region, the Swedish government has adopted 2 new development cooperation strategies, one for the Middle East and North Africa region and one for the Syria crisis. And they are implemented during 2016 to 2020 with a combined financial commitment of $420 million. Among the top priorities in the MENA strategy is sustainable water management, where we focus well over $10 million annually in supporting regional water initiatives. We are also working globally to improve transboundary aspects of water management, including the Nile, the Zambezi River, the Mekong River, and of course also the Jordan River basin. And I wanted to say just 2 words about the Jordan River Valley, and then I'll wrap up. But of course work to improve cooperation over the Jordan River and its rehabilitation has been on top of our agenda for a while. The river's importance to Jordanians, Palestinians and Israelis leaves the respective governments with little choice but to act, even as the gravity of any action perceived as a political threat increases the danger of postponing any regionally cooperative efforts. There is also the issue of migratory birds, of course, and so on and so on. And for us, we believe that the key is to find a way to have more fresh water to be allowed to flow in the river in the years to come. I'm summarizing a very, very complex issue, obviously, in one sentence. And we also believe that a more equitable sharing of water is a prerequisite for a lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. So in conclusion, Sweden, as well as the Swedish Embassy, of course, will continue to push for sensible and sound approaches for improved water management in the region, including increased cooperation, adequate representation, as well as equitable and fair outcomes. And I think that this conference, as well as the continued discussion on these water issues, where some of the good people in this room are devoting themselves very, very hard, will continue to put this in focus and to yield concrete results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Carl Magnus. The next speaker is the ambassador of the EU.
Thank you very much, Odette, and a big thanks to INSS and EcoPeace and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for putting this very, very important topic on the agenda and allowing us to speak on it. It's really, really much appreciated. Now, about 20 years ago, when I, for the first time, was exposed to the Middle East peace process, there was a talk of 3 tracks. There was a Palestinian track, there was a Syrian track, and there was a Lebanese track. Now, we haven't heard much about the Syrian and Lebanese track for some years. But the point here was that water was viewed as a strategic resource for obvious reasons and was actually considered a final status issue. I want to bring that back because I think that water is of such immense importance as the distinguished previous speakers have already outlined, that it deserves to be treated as a final status issue. Now, the situation is, I think, the following concerning the peace process and the other final status issues. We have, for too long a time, in my opinion, labored under a principle which makes a lot of sense, but makes reaching an agreement very difficult. And that principle is that nothing is agreed before everything is agreed. We should reverse it. We should say that we should start negotiating and we should implement everything that we can agree on here now.
Here.
Okay. At least I got something right. And this, I think, pertains very much to the issue of water. As we have heard, and as I can certainly testify to, there is already a lot of cooperation going on regionally, and also cooperation involving the Israelis and the Palestinians on water. Just to mention some of the things that we from the European Union are involved in, let me mention the very apropos, it's called the SWIM project, and it's about water in the whole MENA region. Israel is also benefiting from this program, but it's a program about building capacity and sharing practices on water management in the whole Middle Eastern region. We are involved in the Red Sea, Dead Sea project, which, as you know, is about pumping from a desalination plant in the Bay of Aqaba, brine up to the Dead Sea, and which will also, incidentally, provide water to the Palestinians in the West Bank and other places. And the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is considering participating in this project with a loan. There's a desalination plant which is supposed to be built with Israeli technology in Gaza and could make the Gazans more independent in terms of their water supply, which we are also, in principle, ready to contribute to. And then, as Karl Magnus also mentioned, we have initiatives like the EcoPeace initiative on the rehabilitation of the Jordan River, which I think is also a classical example of how it's possible. I mean, you have only rehabilitated about 2 kilometers, but there's a long way to go. But it's a good example of how Jordanians, Palestinians, and Israelis have been able to come together on this issue and involving also the local population. And there's a whole master plan for this. So there's a lot to do here. But I think what we need to do is that we gotta revise our approach to the peace process, which would allow us to address the issue of water and a number of other issues also. And I think this is exactly what the international community has been doing with the recent Quartet report. As you know, nobody are expecting sort of like a big bang where you just bring Israeli and Palestinians negotiators together and then hope for a miracle that they will come out with an agreement on the final status issues. I think most people are warning against this approach at this point in time because the level of trust between the parties are simply not at a level where this is going to be feasible. And I think that as has also been stipulated in the Quartet report, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, what we need to do is to build up basic confidence on the ground through an approach of small steps. And the Quartet report are enumerating a number of those steps that needs to be taken by both parties. And you know, I think what they are, but basically it's about the possibility of Palestinian development in Area C, restraint on settlement expansion, and also a stop and demolition of Palestinian structures. And similarly, there are very strong demands to the Palestinian side, also stop the incitement, stop the terror, and find a solution to the Gaza issue. So I think that approach would very much embrace also the idea of trying to make progress on the issue of water cooperation. And I just had a meeting with KOGAT the other day, who, as you know, is in charge on a day-to-day basis of the situation in the territories seen from the Israeli point of view. And I was very glad to hear that one of the things that has happened is an agreement to revive the Joint Water Committee, which is actually an old Oslo committee, which I think, if it happens, could really be maybe not a game-changing development, but certainly a very positive step in the direction of trying to utilize some of these structures that are already in place. And as I said, this is very topical because it deals with water. So this would be my approach, and I don't want to prolong this intervention more than necessary, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying, and I can certainly assure you that the European Union and the rest of the Quartet, I think, would be behind such an approach. And of course, it will have to be contextualized and so on and so forth. But the principle of moving forward in areas where we can move forward and reap the advantages of cooperation here and now, I mean, is to us, a no-brainer. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ambassador Faborg Anderson. I think that what I heard this morning from three European or two European and one European Union ambassador is new music, and I must say that I very much like this new music. It's an interesting beginning to a process which may bring us closer to the two-state solution. Before turning to you, Mr. Kamen, I would like to ask you, because you, three of you spoke about participation of your organization and your countries in water projects. Is there a mechanism which coordinates the different projects in which the different countries contribute? And if not, should there be some sort of mechanism, whether in Brussels or elsewhere, which basically looks at the various projects, those that are needing assistance, and coordinates this so we use better the limited resources that the international community, especially the European Union, can allot or appropriate for these projects.
Maybe just a quick response on that. There's a concept called joint programming, which is an idea that has been around for a long time in the EU, which is basically trying to align the assistance efforts of the 28 member states with those of the Commission, the DG Development. And I think it has received additional impetus lately, and there are increasingly examples of successful cooperation and coordination between member states and the EU. The problem is, of course, that there are also some larger structures internationally that are coordinating aid. There are, as you know, the UNDP, there's a World Bank and others, and then first and foremost, they're the countries themselves. I mean, what we want to achieve is, of course, ownership to the development efforts, and therefore everything should be coordinated within the framework of the national development plans of the countries that are recipients to our aid. So these different coordination mechanisms tend to clash every once in a while, and obviously there's also a certain wish on part of donors to have their own flags planted on their various development projects. I don't think any of us can quite deny that this is a fact. And I think it's going to be particularly difficult in this region maybe to do these things, but it shouldn't stop us from trying, and I think there are also other mechanisms, parallel financing and looser forms of coordination that could ensure more synergy than we have now. Thanks.
Director Jonathan Kamen, please.
Just because before I start my remarks, just to add on what you said in terms of the challenge is that there actually is an effort, maybe not successful, but an effort for donors to coordinate on projects such as these when it comes to programming in the West Bank and Gaza specifically. There's sector water working groups, there's many other working groups, but the hard part about those working groups that are all coordinated primarily out of Ramallah and Jerusalem is that they don't have the Israelis at the table. And I think it's true, at least for here on the ground, that we do need some, for those who are familiar with it, we have a long history of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee chaired by the Norwegians, which has as part of its mandate bringing together Israelis and Palestinians and donors, but it's not working. And I think there's a need to reinvigorate, at least here in the region, those donors of us who are working in the area on project coordination. So it's a challenge that we need to rise up to. First of all, I want to thank also both the INSS, our dear partners and friends, Gidon, EcoPeace, Middle East, and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation for supporting this conversation this morning. It's really no issue in USAID that we talk more about than water. And it's a huge amount of our investment and time. I'm also coming to this, I think, from a little bit different perspective. I'm probably the only head of the development wing of the U.S. government, of the development wing, where really the job that we do is kind of engage in the nuts and bolts of doing specific projects on the ground in multiple sectors. But there's a lot of kind of what we do that feels like it's creating actual facts on the ground, working with the partners on both sides, both Israeli and Palestinian. So in some ways, I think I come at this at a practical question about what can we do to move the ball forward on this topic. And I think the other kind of key point for us is that, you know, just building on the comments that were made about the fact that the challenge of trying to solve all the problems at once, is that really we see this as a perfect candidate for the idea of trying to tackle a problem, which creates a model for cooperation, and most importantly, confidence building measures for both sides to understand how they can come together motivated by self-interest and motivated by the kinds of issues that really affect them across a very small piece of real estate to solve problems. And I think in a lot of ways, our experience here has been about trying to find ways to bring those together. We've talked a lot all morning long. We've had 20 years of Oslo, describing the problems in the West Bank in terms of access to water are well known to all of us here. It's a major challenge and a major problem. For me, and I've been here now 3.5 years, the fascinating, kind of realization, and it's not brand new, but I think it's gotten a lot of press, that on the Israel side, that you solve the water problem in the past couple of years really has presented such a unique and wonderful opportunity for us to build on that success and find ways to use it as a model in the West Bank and Gaza. We have you've tackled so many challenges and issues on this side of the water, whether it's desalination or wastewater treatment and wastewater reuse in agriculture, or water management and water savings and management of the whole system, all of which really have been fantastic achievements, and so much of which we can use in our daily work to kind of transfer in some ways to the Palestinian side and help them understand what it is that they can learn from the Israelis. And I think that we should talk a little bit about some small examples where that's happening already, and how we can build on that in order to increase, as I said, confidence between the two sides, that when self-motivation is the driving force, they can come together and find solutions. Let me spend a few minutes talking about the work that AID has done. We've been here for over 20 years. We are working in many, many different sectors. We used to be more focused on Israel. Now in the past 20 years, almost entirely focused on working in the West Bank and Gaza. But since 2000...
Foundation, maybe?
Sorry?
With the Clinton Foundation? Too?
We're an arm of the U.S. government doing development work. But we have made, since 2000, we've invested over $600 million in improving the water infrastructure system here. We have built, in the West Bank primarily, over 975 kilometers of new pipe. And in many ways, we have been trying to kind of create, again, the infrastructure on the Palestinian side, so that at this point in time, we believe, really, the question is really just one about price and distribution of the water that Israel has to be sold and negotiated on fair, equitable market terms between the two sides. We've invested a huge amount in Gaza as well since Operation Protective Edge 3 years ago. Last year, we're working in coordination with the Palestinian Water Authority and the Coastal Management Water Authority in Gaza they have a master plan for Gaza, the Gaza Sustainable Water Program. And the idea really is to kind of create, again, a north-south carrier infrastructure that has the ability to take in new water. In the long term, there's a goal to build a desalination plant there, but we're going to require lots of heavy coordination and investment. But in the short term, there's no solution to Gaza other than buying water at a fair price from the Israelis. And we've invested it in the last couple of years, $60 million to begin to build the infrastructure in Gaza to provide the wherewithal to take in that water. And we are prepared, if we see the value in continuing the investment, to put up to another $100 million in the next 5 years to build out that infrastructure. I think that for us, again, the idea of trying to look for the little ways in which we can facilitate connection and connectivity between the two parties is a huge part of the work that we do. And if you look at the investment we've made in agriculture, et cetera, in the West Bank, in Gaza, primarily in the West Bank, there's lots of examples where we have turned to Israeli technology and netafim, drip irrigation, et cetera, to demonstrate concretely and specifically to the Palestinians that they can incorporate these technologies and use them in their work to double, triple, and quadruple the product that they have out of agriculture, for example. And we have great examples of doing that throughout the West Bank, using that technology, whether it's in strawberries or olives or other kind of new diversification of products using wastewater treatment based on techniques borrowed from the Israelis that show that there's huge potential for the Palestinian economy to grow. And we know that the growth of the Palestinian economy provides stability and security for the Israelis. I also want to touch on another example. As a matter of fact, you took the wind out of my sail in mentioning it earlier about looking at the success we've had recently with the electricity agreement that was signed about 2-3 months ago between the Israelis and Palestinians. Again, you're looking at a problem that many thought was intractable. There was a huge amount of debt and dislocation and I think lack of goodwill in terms of how to solve this problem. And you, through lots of very hard, long negotiations over many, many months, negotiations in which no donor really played any role at all. This was a negotiation between the Israeli Electric Company, the Palestinian counterpart, Penra, and in the middle, Kogat, playing a facilitating role. The two sides came together and managed to hammer out an agreement, in principle, to transfer autonomy of the Israeli control of electricity provided to the West Bank over to the Palestinians. Now, they are just at the beginning of that process, and now comes the hard work of trying to kind of put facts on the ground as far as developing the infrastructure. But the fact that the two parties are able to kind of hammer out this kind of agreement and work out a pricing schedule that made sense to them, and of course, as I said, much hard work lays out in the future, I think is a perfect example of where when the two parties are willing and ready, they can come together. And let me also say that agreement is an example where donors can play a role to facilitate. The agreement is signed, the outline of what has to be done now to transfer control of electricity is laid out, but I think now there's going to be a hard part of trying to really make investments in technology, et cetera, in which the donors can play a key role at providing funds and resources to help the two sides to basically implement that agreement. And I see the same model as something that we can follow in water as well. So in conclusion, really, let me just say that again, I mean, this is really the fact that at this point, we're really talking about it, just really a question about price, distribution, and transfer of technology lends us to think that there's so much here that can be solved when the two parties come together and can really kind of focus on the small baby steps. In a lot of ways, the policies that we try to pursue, we always refer to as crawl, walk, and run. You start to crawl, then you can walk, and finally we can run. And I think there's much that we can do to start the crawling process that we've done already, and I think there's really much more we can invest to kind of move to the next level as well in water. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Kamen. I open the floor to questions, not long statements. Yes, please.
I have 2 points of information concerning your question about coordinating environmental projects. I came across in 2000 the Triodos Bank that's headquartered in the Netherlands and Great Britain, that they created the International Association of Investors in the Social Economy, a full network of banking institutions. The Triodos is the only one that I'm familiar with. In America, in Rhode Island, is the Domini Social Investment Company, which does similar kinds of things. Thank you very much.
Next. Yes, please.
Jenny from the
From?
My question is, in the previous panel, it was mentioned first of all, water is humanitarian aid, which is stated that it was tried to bring some kind of solution, and it was always connected to political demands. So, and they even use the German media, for example, to blame Israel for the water problem. How is it even possible if it's always connected to political demands? How is it possible? It sounds so positive that you say, and I wish it was so positive, but how is it possible to solve it if it's always connected to the political demands?
Any volunteer?
But I mean, but I don't know. It's true that I think we need a bit of a mind change on some of these issues here, and I think part of the mind change is to actually show that it is possible through small steps to change something, to move ahead with cooperation, to build trust, as has been said by others. But of course there is an overall sort of political context also, but I think that is being addressed as well. I mean, one of the problems that the Palestinians have had in the occupied territories is the fact that quite a substantial part of the water available there has been used by the settlements. And I don't think there's any two ways about it. I understand that Mr. Steinitz said that the objective in the future is to ensure that everybody has access to the same amount of water, be they settlers and Palestinians. This is a very, very important statement, of course, because, I mean, it implies that this might not be the case now. And I think that if we can agree on issues like that, I want to say, no, I want to tell you something, mister. I want to tell you something. The president of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, was almost booed out of your Knesset a couple of years ago because he dared to say that maybe there was an issue here of unequal access to water by the Palestinians and the Israelis. The fact that your minister, one of your ministers, Mr. Steinitz, as I understand, is saying now that it's very important to ensure that there's equal access. I mean, this is a major step in the right direction. This is where we want to go. So, I mean, if that's what you mean, you know, I think, you know, this is the point. I mean, we need to agree that there needs to be equitable distribution of water. And I think this is a point well taken by the Palestinians, and certainly something that we support, and we understand now that the Israeli government also supports. So, here we are.
Let me help.
Complete answer to her question. She asked why can't we overcome their. There are two different problems here. One problem is that what you said, that we want to share the water to everybody. But the second question is, why do they don't want to improve their situation if they say no, if we don't get an advantage in the political issue, we don't want this issue as well cleared, and then we are blamed as well again.
Let me try to solve this. Your question linked to your question, the first one. And I will be undiplomatically frank, and I will say that from the Palestinian point of view, and I'm not justifying them, and I'm not trying to help the case, what they are saying, our experience as Palestinians is that Israel may solve the water issue and run away from the rest of the problems. And so it's not that they don't want to see more water to the Palestinian citizens in Nablus or in Hebron or whatever. And there is a way of solving it which Lars, Ambassador for Borg Anderson, was involved in trying to combine the two approach in the roadmap. And that is to say, you solve the water issue or you create the political platform which says the aim, the political aim of this whole exercise of the peace process or whatever you want to call it, negotiations, is there, and we are all committed, Israel, Palestinians, international community. However, below this umbrella, we want to solve what can be solved tomorrow morning. And all the three speakers in the morning panel basically said the same thing. Arnon and Shaul said, we don't have a water problem in Israel. We can desalinate whatever quantity we need for us, Israel, and the neighbors. So technically, there is no problem. The problem is creating the confidence on the Palestinian side that basically the fact that they are willing to solve the water problem doesn't call for them to abandon Jerusalem as they see. And so once everyone concerned in the region and international community can create this platform saying the goal remains the goal, but we are willing to support incremental, by stages, the progress towards the attainment of this goal. And this is what we heard this morning is basically a willingness. For me, it's the first time that I have heard from the international community, or representative of the international community, willing to think in this direction. I'm not saying that they issued a declaration, I'm not saying that I can't commit them to that, but I heard this willingness to consider this change of paradigm, and this is great achievement in my view towards, we have a new administration which is probably looking at these various global issues, among them is the Middle East, and if everyone involved adopted, we came out from this morning with some achievement. Yes, please.
My name is Elizabeth. I work for Disha Gaza, and I wanted to ask all of you. You came in that the pace of the progress right now is basically crawling. While the situation in Gaza is dire. The UN estimated that in 2020 Gaza will be unlivable, in part because of the water situation. Now, 97% of the water in Gaza is not safe for human consumption. I wanted to ask you, what can we do to move the pace from crawling to racing at the speed of light, because this is what is needed right now in Gaza. Children there are not going thirsty, they are simply drinking polluted water and getting sick. What is stopping this? What needs to be done to accelerate, water from Israel being sold to Gaza, desalination plants? What needs to be done? What is not happening? Who is responsible for that? Thank you.
Well, political will, for starters. There has to be political will, and that's a tough one to overcome. But I think there's two compelling issues going on here. For Israel's stability and shared concerns about, as was mentioned earlier, the effect of lack of control of the system, pollution that they share. But the truth of the matter is that the donor community, it's coming together, there's certainly a lot of plans that have been put together in terms of the need to kind of build a desalination plant and the need to kind of build a power plant and bring in power or gas to support the building of that plant. But the two sides do have to come together on the Israeli side to agreement to how they will provide power and whether they feel like they have their security concerns about providing electricity, for example, into Gaza are being met, or providing more water. Security concerns about it being diverted. Those are real concerns that have to be addressed. And on the Palestinian side, the reality is that they're facing a huge financial crisis. They don't have the money in Ramallah to pay for additional water unless they can put a system in place to charge and collect for the money for the water that's used. And getting that, and even if customers pay for it, having it remitted back to Ramallah is a big challenge, as we all know. So I think the two parties have to come together to figure out a way to fix that problem, recognizing on the Palestinian side that there's a financial aspect to this which has to be resolved, and then on the Israeli side, a security issue which has to be resolved, plus paying for the water and power that they will provide. And the donors have to be ready to step in to provide the support and money that they need. And I think that there's been lots of gaps, not so much from the people at this table right now, but certainly from a lot of other donors who made big commitments to provide money, especially after Protective Edge, that have not lived up to those commitments. And I think that until those other donors can provide that support and provide the funding for these kind of projects, there won't be the wherewithal to move them forward.
Comments or anyone?
You said rightly that the situation is difficult, but infrastructural changes take time. That's very true. So we have to see that we speed up what we are doing. But I mean, for example, what we do, building a wastewater plant, this is nothing you can do in 3 months. But yes, we have to speed up. We have to see that as many things we need for the construction come in. I know that there is a problem, as Mr. Kamin mentioned, with security, so we also have to make sure that those goods we transport in are really only used for our projects and are not diverted elsewhere in tunnels or wherever. And I can assure you that on our side, as regards the German projects, we are both willing to work speedily and to make sure that all experts that work there and all material we bring is really used for the purposes that we bring it in for.
Yes, very briefly to say that this is also of great concern to us, of course. We have both a big humanitarian commitment to support day-to-day food packages and whatnot, including, of course, water and a commitment to bigger infrastructure projects, just like the previous speakers have said. And I totally agree with the analysis of Mr. Kamin. I think this is a pertinent way to formulate it. But of course, we are aware of the dire situation and the catastrophic prospects that the experts are painting of the developments there.
So I wanted to add there to show how important it is to highlight self-interest. So 3 years ago, the Palestinian Energy Authority asked the government of Israel to commit to supplying electricity for the North Gaza sewage treatment plant that the European Union and the government of Sweden have, through the World Bank, been building. And that treatment plant can treat 1/3 of Gaza's sewage, that same sewage that's flowing into the Mediterranean and was responsible for closing the Ashkelon desalination plant. Until it was made public, and it was made public not out of some government notice, but through